Raghava Rama, Raghava Rama, Raghava Papa Mam. Raghava Rama, Raghava Rama, Raghava Lakshman. Krishna Kesava, Krishna Kesava, Krishna Kesava Pahi Mam. She's Rakshamam. Rama, Raghava Rama, Raghava Rama, Raghava Rakshamam. Krishna Kesava, Krishna Kesava, Krishna Kesava Pahi Mam.
Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava, Krishna Keshava Pahi Mam.
That's the prayers for protection from the Chaitanya Charitamrita. So this is a reading from the Krishna book, by a translation of the 10th canto of the Srimad Bhagavatam by the founder of the International Society of Krishna Consciousness, Srila Prabhupada. So this is chapter 9, and this book 1. This is Mother Yashoda binding Lord Krishna. Once upon a time, seeing that her maidservant was engaged in different household duties, Mother Yashoda personally took charge of churning butter. And while she churned butter, she sang the childhood pastimes of Krishna and enjoyed thinking of her son. The end of her sari was tightly wrapped while she churned, and on account of her intense love for her son, milk automatically dripped from her breasts, which moved as she laboured very hard, churning with 2 hands. The bangles and bracelets on her hands tinkled as they touched each other, and her earrings and breasts shook. There were drops of perspiration on her face, and the flower garland which was on her head scattered here and there. Before this picturesque sight, Lord Krishna appeared as a child. He felt hungry, and out of love for his mother, he wanted her to stop churning. He indicated that her first business was to let him suck her breast, and then churn butter later. But Yashoda took her son on her lap and pushed the nipples of her breasts into his mouth. And while Krishna was sucking the milk, she was smiling, enjoying the beauty of her child's face. Suddenly the milk, which was on the oven, began to boil over. Just to stop the milk from spilling, Mother Yashoda at once put Krishna aside and went to the oven. Left in that state by his mother, Krishna became very angry, and his lips and eyes became red in rage. He pressed his teeth and lips, and taking up a piece of stone, he immediately broke the butter pot. He took butter out of it, and with false tears in his eyes, he began to eat the butter in a secluded place. In the meantime, Mother Yashoda returned to the churning place after seeing the overflowing milk pan in order. She saw the broken pot in which the churning yogurt was kept. Since she could not find her boy, she concluded that the broken pot was his work. She began to smile as she thought, "The child is very clever. After breaking the pot, he has left this place, fearing punishment." After she sought all over, she found a big wooden grinding mortar which was kept upside down, and she found her son sitting on it. He was taking butter, which was hanging from the ceiling on the swing, and he was feeding it to the monkeys. She saw Krishna looking this way and that way in fear of her, because he was conscious of his naughty behavior. After seeing her son so engaged, she very silently approached him from behind. Krishna, however, quickly saw her coming at him, and with a stick in her hand, and immediately he got down from the grinding mortar and began to flee in fear. Mother Yashoda chased him to all corners, trying to capture the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is never approached even by the meditations of great yogis. In other words, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, who is never caught by the yogis and speculators, was playing like a little child for such a great devotee as Mother Yashoda. Mother Yashoda, however, could not easily catch the fast-running child because of her thin waist and heavy body. Still, she tried to follow him as fast as possible. Her hair loosened and the flowers in her hair fell to the ground. Although she was tired, she somehow reached her naughty child and captured him. When he was caught, Krishna was almost on the point of crying. He smeared his hands all over his eyes, which were anointed with black eye cosmetics. The child saw his mother's face while she stood over him, and his eyes became restless from fear. Mother Yashoda could understand that Krishna was unnecessarily afraid, and for his benefit she wanted to allay his fears. Being the topmost well-wisher of her child, Mother Yashoda began to think, if the child is too fearful of me, I don't know what will happen to him. Mother Yashoda then threw away her stick. In order to punish him, she thought to bind his hands with some ropes. She did not know it, but it was actually impossible for her to bind the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Mother Yashoda was thinking that Krishna was her tiny child. She did not know that the child had no limitation. There is no inside or outside of him, nor beginning or end. He is unlimited and all-pervading. Indeed, he is himself the whole cosmic manifestation. Still, Mother Yashoda was thinking of Krishna as her child. Although he was beyond the reach of all senses, she endeavoured to bind him to a wooden grinding mortar. But when she tried to bind him, she found that the rope she was using was too short by 2 inches. She gathered more ropes from the house and added to it, but at the end she found the same shortage. In this way she connected all the ropes available at home. But when the final knot was added, she saw that it was still 2 inches too short. Mother Yashoda was smiling, but she was astonished. How is this happening? In attempting to bind her son, she became tired. She was perspiring, and the garland on her head fell down. Then Lord Krishna appreciated the hard labour of his mother, and being compassionate upon her, he agreed to be bound by the ropes. Krishna, playing as a human child in the house of Mother Yashoda, was performing his own selected pastimes. Of course, no one can control the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The pure devotee surrenders himself onto the lotus feet of the Lord, who may either protect or vanquish the devotee. But for his part, the devotee never forgets his own position of surrender. Similarly, the Lord also feels transcendental pleasure by submitting himself to the protection of the devotee. This was exemplified by Krishna's surrender unto his mother Yashoda. And just a quick point where I was listening to a lecture by Andrew, and I caught this different accounts of these pastimes by different acharyas. And in one account it's saying when Mother Yashoda was running out of ropes in her own house to try and bind Krishna, she went to other gopis' houses and mothers' houses and asked them for ropes, and they came forward and gave her ropes, and still it was 2 inches too short. But the point being is that whether Krishna was bound or not, it was still, she was engaging others in devotional service, and this is a Sankirtan principle. We should engage others in Krishna's service. This is the highest service that we can perform, is to engage others in service to Krishna. So we do that by distributing Prabhupada's books, by distributing Prasadam, and by performing the Yuga Dharma Harinam Sankirtan. So these are the 3 methods by which we can engage others in Krishna's service. So we can engage others in Krishna's service by distributing books. And even if people don't want to read the books, they may say, I've got so many books, or I can't read. Well, does your child go to school? Well, you can give the book to your school library. You can give the book to a friend. You see, there's so many ways to get people to accept a book, even if they don't want to read it themselves. So, and also with Prasadam, we can make Prasadam. We can distribute it. Biscuits. We can go around the shops, make biscuits, and go around the shops. I remember in Bristol, I made pasta and just some simple, those simple containers. And just went down the road saying, lunchtime, would you like to try some pasta? I didn't ask for money. I mean, just distributing some pasta, and I said it was vegetarian pasta. And then you make connections, immediately make connections, and it's very nice. And then And then you could make a business out of it if you were distributing biscuits. Would you like like to try these biscuits? Yes, yes. And then you go back again. Says, would you like to buy a packet? So simple. First you give, and then if they want more, then you say yes. Oh, so much for a packet or whatever. And then you can put that donation, say, to cow protection, which is very important. So, or to book distribution, or to the temple, whatever. So, and also Harinam, okay, people may be shy to go out on Harinam, but it's very important to do Harinam. Very, very important. We all gather in the temple and we can chant in the temple, but we get far more benefit by chanting outside. And so we're going to try and establish a Harinam on Saturdays, where we meet, say, about 12:30, and then we can just go around the streets and chant for, say, an hour. That's not very long. Come back, and then perhaps we can have a few biscuits or something, and then a little snack, and then that's nice. We've done some Harinam just for an hour on a Saturday. That'd be very good. We could all meet at 12:30 in the restaurant. So you could try this Saturday. You never know. And you get 1,000 times the benefit. Why? It's Dhammatastika, isn't it? So you get 1,000 times the benefit of whatever devotional activities you perform. And also, it's something like 1,000 times the benefit of japa. Doing Harinam on the streets, it's like, if you do 5 minutes, it's about, it's about like 50 rounds of japa or something like that, So you get a lot of benefits, very important. And also with Harinam, because it's the Yuga Dharma, Lord Chaitanya is very pleased when we do it. And then it represents the activities of the gopis. So the gopis extended themselves to bring others to Krishna consciousness, to bring others to Krishna. So that's it. It's a selfless service. You won't get any praises for doing it. You won't, be saying, oh, you're such and such. They're a big devotee. They go out on Harinam. You'll probably get ignored. But the point is, Maya will ignore you as well, which is very good. So the point is, if you engage in Harinam Sankirtan, you're protected. So they're very important, really important. Anyway. After binding her son, Mother Yashoda engaged herself in household affairs. At that time, bound up to the wooden mortar, Krishna could see a pair of trees before him, which are known as Arjuna trees, the great reservoir of pleasure. Lord Shri Krishna thus thought to himself, Mother Yashoda, first of all, left without feeding me sufficient milk, and therefore I broke the pot of yogurt and distributed the sock of butter in charity to the monkeys. Now she has brought me up to a wooden mortar, so I shall do something more mischievous than before. And thus he thought of pulling down the very tall Arjuna trees. Now it's interesting here. What do we make butter out of in England? What do we make butter out of? Cream, milk or cream. But here, what's it made out of? Yogurt. They make it out of yogurt. Interesting, isn't it? So that's whole culture there, We should investigate this, look into these things, There is a history behind the pair of Arjuna trees. In their previous lives, the trees were born as the human sons of Kavera, and their names were Nala, Kavera and Manigriva. Fortunately, they came within the vision of the Lord. In their previous lives, they were cursed by the great sage Narada in order to receive the highest benediction of seeing Lord Krishna. This benediction curse was bestowed upon them because of their forgetfulness due to intoxication. This story will be narrated in the next chapter. Thus ends the Bhaktivedanta purport of the 9th chapter of Krishna, Mother Yashoda binding Lord Krishna. Nice? It's quite riveting, isn't it? So it's just interesting that you can come before Lord Krishna either after executing millions of lifetimes of devotional service, Gyata Sukriti, or pious activities, Sukriti, or you can offend a devotee, a pure devotee, and well, not get there straight away. They still had to burn off the reactions to their offence, but it was a benediction curse. But the result of it was that they came face to face with Krishna, which otherwise they might not have done, because they were in the heavenly planets in an enjoying mentality. And very difficult to pursue spiritual life or devotional service in the heavenly planets, because the ability to enjoy is so high there. It's very high, and the duration of life is very long. But in the middle planetary system, the Mata Loka, where we are, the planet of death, our lives are very short. We've got a very short lifespan. So even if there was an opportunity to enjoy, we can't really enjoy it because it goes so quickly. But you can engage in Bhakti Yoga and get the results very fast. You can actually go back to Godhead in one lifetime, which is nothing compared to the lifetime with the demigods. So this is what Prabhupada wants us to do, is to perfect our lives, develop love for Krishna, and go back home, back to the spiritual world. And if we take shelter of his books and follow them, follow what they say, and know what's in them, which is quite important, then we got a very, very, not a chance, that will happen. I can say we'll have a good chance, if you do it, that will happen, as simple as that. And for me, when I was reading the books regularly, I was following, I was in Soho Street, we're doing a marathon, and Radharamani said to us, okay, don't overdo it, just do your normal hours, let's say 5 or 6 hours on the street, come back, have some milk, read Krishna book, and take rest. And that's what we did. And then, and we're doing that religiously throughout the marathon. And so we were fully engaged, though we weren't overdoing it. And then one evening we were reading the Krishna book, and then something really unusual happened. We're reading, and I was reading to a friend, and then my friend was reading, and he was reading the Krishna book, and it was going into my ears, and then all of a sudden we saw Krishna and Balaram right in front of us. And it was there's this painting of Krishna and Balaram. It used to be in the restaurant in Soho Street, and now it's in the one of the flats. But it's exactly the same as where Balaram is leaning on Krishna, and they're sort of like relaxed, in a relaxed pose. They're standing up but in a relaxed pose. It's quite a famous picture, but it was exactly like that. That is what they look like in the spiritual world. In that sense, because that's who we saw. And then and I didn't say anything, and then the devotee finished reading, and then afterwards I went up to him and says, "Did you see what I saw?" And he went, "Yes." So if we saturate our lives with Krishna consciousness, that things like that can happen. Because what we've done is that we've literally saturated our day-to-day experience with Krishna consciousness, so we come to that level where you're beyond the modes of material nature, and then you're open to these things. This is my understanding anyway. Even if you are sunk in the modes, because of Krishna's mercy, you can experience Krishna. But it more so if we develop the mode of goodness and we engage in devotional service, or dedicate all our activities to the Supreme. Now that can mean anything. That can mean that you can be a pot washer. You can be, you can be at home doing your duties as a mother, your duties as a father, whatever they are. Bring up the children. But if your activities are dedicated to the Supreme, you've got just as much chance of experiencing Krishna through the eyes of the Sastra, through the Krishna book, through Bhagavatam, through Bhagavad Gita, through Chaitanya Charitamrita. By regularly reading these scriptures, you've got just as much chance of experiencing Krishna as anyone else. And then we should take advantage of this. Because when we engage ourselves in material activities, that's all they are. They're material activities, they have no depth, and all they do, ultimately they waste your time. That's all they do, they waste your time. But there's no depth to them. And you can you can go with a particular thing in the pastime in the material world, whatever it is. You may be into snooker or whatever sports or whatever it is. You can take a little section of that mundane activity and try and enjoy it, and then but it will just dry out, and it's like chewing the tube, But the Krishna pastimes, you can read them over and over again and not get bored. I mean, I've been reading them for 20 years, and you just don't get bored. It's like you haven't read them before. Simple as that, Obviously, if I had a brain, I'd remember them. but I don't mean it like that. There's a bit of humour. But when you do approach them again, obviously you know the stories. And there was one devotee that he came to the movement. Before he came to the movement, he had the Krishna book, and his wife was reading him the Krishna book, and he goes, I know the ending of this story. How do I know the ending of this? He knew exactly what was going to happen, and that was from a previous life as a devotee. So really, really, really important to read the books, and it's a delight and it's a pleasure. Deliverance of Nalikavera and Manigriva. The story of the cursing of Nalikavera and Manigriva and their deliverance by Krishna under the all blissful desire of the great sage Narada is here described. The two great demigods, Nalikavera and Manigriva, were sons of the treasurer of the demigods, Kuvera, who was a great devotee of Lord Shiva. By the grace of Lord Shiva, Kuvera's material opulences had no limit. As a rich man's sons often become addicted to wine and women, so the two sons of Kuvera were also addicted to wine and sex. You can see, I say the royal family, but you can see this in the royal family. I'm just saying, you can see this. So it's not just, it's truth. And when you look around in the world, you can actually see that this is no speculation. They're just telling you what's what. As a rich man's son often become addicted to wine and women, so these two sons of Kuvera were also addicted to wine and sex. Once these two demigods, desiring to enjoy, entered the garden of Lord Shiva in the province of Kailash, on the bank of the Mandadika Ganges. There they drank much and engaged in hearing the sweet singing of beautiful women who accompanied them in that garden of fragrant flowers. In an intoxicated condition, they both entered the water of the Ganges, which was full with lotus flowers. And there they began to enjoy the company of young girls, exactly as the male elephant enjoys the female elephants within the water. While they were just thus enjoying themselves in the water, all of a sudden, Narada, the great sage, happened to pass that way. He could understand that the demigods, Nalikavera and Manigriva, were too intoxicated and could not even see that he was passing. The young girls, however, were not so intoxicated as the demigods, and they at once became ashamed at being naked before the great sage Narada. They began to cover themselves with all haste. The two demigods, sons of Kuvera, were so intoxicated that they could not appreciate the presence of the sage Narada, and therefore did not cover their bodies. On seeing the two demigods so degraded by intoxication, Narada desired their welfare, and therefore he exhibited his causeless mercy upon them by cursing them. A saintly person, when he's offended, if a normal conditioned soul gets offended, you should go flat and get angry, want revenge. But here he's actually, they offend him and he's desiring their welfare. Because the great sage was compassionate upon them, he wanted to finish their false enjoyment of intoxication and association with young girls, and wanted them to see Lord Krishna face to face. He conceived of cursing them as follows. He said, the attraction for material enjoyment is due to an increase of the mode of passion. A person in the material world, when favoured by the material opulence of riches, generally becomes addicted to three things: intoxication, sex, and gambling. Materially, and you can find all those shops, in all those places in Dublin. You can find them. I'm just saying. So it's there. Intoxication, pubs, sex. Well, obviously there's houses and gambling. You see that, especially gambling, especially in Cavan. Not in gambling places in Cavan. Yeah. Materially opulent men being puffed up with the accumulation of wealth, also becomes so merciless that they indulge in killing animals by opening slaughterhouses, and they think that they themselves will never die. Such foolish persons, forgetting the laws of nature, become overtly infatuated with the body. They forget that the material body, even though very much advanced in civilization up to the position of the demigods, will finally be burnt to ashes. And while one is living, whatever the external condition of the body may be, within there is only stool, urine, and various kinds of worms. How about that? Thus, being engaged in jealousy and violence to other bodies, materialists cannot understand the ultimate goal of life. So they can't understand the ultimate goal of life because they're engaged in jealousy and violence to other bodies, other living entities. And without knowing this goal of life, they generally glide down to a hellish condition in their next life. Such foolish persons commit all kinds of sinful activities on account of this temporary body, and they are even unable to consider whether this body actually belongs to them. Generally, it is said that the body belongs to the persons who feed the body. One may therefore consider whether this body belongs to one personally or to the master to whom one renders service. The master of slaves claims full right to the bodies of the slaves because the masters feed the slaves. It may be questioned then whether the body belongs to the father, who is the seed-giving master of this body, or to the mother who develops the child's body in her womb. Foolish persons are engaged in committing all sorts of sins due to the misconception of identifying the material body with the self. But one should be intelligent enough to understand to whom this body belongs. A foolish person indulges in killing other animals to maintain the body, but he does not consider whether his body belongs to him or to his father or mother or maternal grandfather. Sometimes the father gives his daughter in charity to a person with a view of getting back the daughter's child as a son. The body may also belong to a stronger man who forces it to work for him. Sometimes the slave's body is sold to the master on the basis that the body will belong to the master. And at the end of life, the body belongs to the fire because the body is given to the fire and burnt to ashes. Or the body is thrown into the street to be eaten by the dogs and vultures. Ever seen that? Dogs eating bodies in Mayapur? Did you see that in Mayapur? It's interesting, you know, in the Western world we're so in love with our dogs, so in love with them. But if you die, they'll eat you. They'll eat your body. Simple as that. If you die in a room with your pet dog and no one knows about it, in a couple of months they'll eat you. Simple as that, you know. Hare Krishna. And there was this poster I saw in England, and it was oh, thank you. It was a poster. There was a little old lady and her dog, and it's called Pet Insurance. And the title was, "If the worst happens, we'll look after your dog." That's called insanity. I wouldn't worry about the dog. That's all I can say. I'm more worried about it. So the Prabhupada actually says that. He says our first duty is to save ourselves. And once we become aware of our position in the material world and what our actual situation is, our first duty is to save ourselves. We can do preaching, that's true, mixed up in our sadhana. That first, love comes first. Because if you can't save yourself, you won't be able to save others. Simple as that. If you don't have it, you won't be able to give it. When a man is infatuated with the false prestige of opulence, he does not care for any moral instruction, but indulges in wine, women, and animal killing. In such circumstances, a poverty-stricken man is often better situated because a poor man thinks of himself in relation to other bodies. A poor man often does not wish to inflict injuries upon other bodies because he can understand more readily that when he himself is injured, he feels pain. As such, the great sage Narada considered that because the demigods Nalakavera and Manigriva were so infatuated by false prestige, that they should be put into a condition of life devoid of opulence. That's why I turned them into trees. A person who has a pinprick in his body does not wish others to be pricked by pins. A considerate man in the life of poverty does not wish others also to be put into that condition. Generally, it is seen that one who has risen from a poverty-stricken life and becomes wealthy creates some charitable institution at the end of his life, so that other poverty-stricken men may be benefited. In short, a compassionate poor man may consider one other's pains and pleasures with empathy. A poor man may seldom be puffed up with false pride, and he may be freed from all kinds of infatuation. He may remain satisfied by whatever he gets for his maintenance by the grace of the Lord. This is an interesting point. He's saved from infatuation. He's saved from infatuation. You get infatuated by others. The same sex, opposite sex, whatever, you get infatuated. Alright, okay. To remain in the poverty-stricken condition is a kind of austerity. According to Vedic culture, therefore, the Brahmanas, as a matter of routine, keep themselves in a poverty-stricken condition to save themselves from false prestige and material opulence. False prestige due to advancement and material prosperity is a great impediment for spiritual emancipation. A poverty-stricken man cannot become unnaturally fat by eating more and more, and on account of not being able to eat more that he requires, his senses are not very turbulent. When the senses are not very turbulent, he cannot become violent. Oh, that's interesting. See how with boxing, some of the people really beat the hell out of it. Like thinking, my God. But their diet is really rough. It's really horrible. Boxers, there are very few vegetarian boxers. And then there's one right vegetarian boxer, I think he's German. But usually they're very very violent. You know? It's like, oh no, Krishna. And so that's because the senses are turbulent. Another advantage of poverty is that a saintly person can easily enter a poor man's house. And thus the poor man can take advantage of the saintly person's association. A very opulent man does not allow anyone to enter his house. So you can see that when you do houses, when you do book to book, you do books door to door. The rich man's houses, the very rich man's houses, they always have electric gates. You can't get in. And they're like prisons. That's what they're like. You can't get in. But the poor man's house you can approach. According to the Vedic system, a saintly person takes the position of a mendicant, so that on the plea of begging something from the householder, he can enter any house. The householder, who has usually forgotten everything about spiritual advancement because he is busy maintaining family affairs, can be benefited by the association of a saintly person. There is a great chance for the poor man to become liberated through association with the saint. Of what use are persons who are puffed up with material opulence and prestige if they are bereft of the association of saintly persons and devotees of the Supreme Personality of Godhead? The great sage Narada therefore thought that it was his duty to put these demigods into a condition where they could not be falsely proud of their material opulence and prestige. Narada was compassionate and wanted to save them from their fallen life. They were in the mode of darkness and being therefore unable to control their senses. So this is one of the really important things in devotional life is to control your senses. So, not overeating and things like this. Well, we can do that. We have to, pray for the mercy of the Srila Prabhupada and the Acharyas, and obviously we need the mercy of Krishna. But if we follow the guidelines of always, associating with devotees, reading the scriptures, chanting the Hare Krishna mantra, and following, no intoxication, no gambling, no meat eating, no illicit sex, automatically your senses become controlled. And then it's just fine adjustments. We may have anatas, but by chanting attentively the 16 rounds of the Hare Krishna mantra, or as many rounds as you can, attentively, then gradually or quickly, according to your level of commitment, your senses have become controlled. In animal life, the animal has no sense to understand he is naked. But Kavera was the treasurer of the demigods, a very responsible man, and Nana Kavera and Manigriva were two of his sons, and yet they became so animalistic and irresponsible that they could not understand due to intoxication that they were naked. To cover the lower part of the body is a principle of human civilization, and when men or women forget this principle, they become degraded. Narada therefore thought that the best punishment for them was to make them immovable living entities or trees. Trees are by nature's law immovable. Although trees are covered by the mode of ignorance, they cannot do harm. The great sage Narada thought it fitting that although the brothers by his mercy would be punished to become trees, they continued to keep their memory to be able to know why they were being punished after changing the body. A living entity generally forgets his previous life, but in special cases, by the grace of the Lord, as with Nana Kavera and Manigriva, one can remember. So that's interesting. So they changed their bodies from demigods into trees, and they could remember their previous lives and why they were put into that condition of the trees. So usually, like as it says in the passage, usually we can't remember our previous life, but by staunch execution of devotional service, and by the providence, an act of providence, you can remember. It mentions this elsewhere in the Bhagavatam. I'm trying to think. Maharaj Bharat, I think it's in that pastime of Maharaj Bharat. So it actually mentions in that pastime, by staunch practice of devotional service, and by an act of providence in your next life, you'll be able to remember your previous life. And funnily enough, there's a devotee in England, and she can remember her previous life as a devotee, and she was male. And in her previous life, she was male, and she got killed in a road crash. And there was a devotee driving the van, and then in that life, he got his stomach was sliced open in the crash. And then they died. And in this life, she was problems with her stomach. And she started having dreams where she could remember the devotees in her previous life. So she went round to the devotees and asked them all, and compiled a whole book about her previous life, showing to see her previous parents. She saw the woman that she was infatuated with, even though she was a brahmachari and all this. And she used to say, the woman that he was infatuated didn't even remember him. And she was saying that, if only I wasn't so infatuated, I might not have been in the body of a woman, I might have got a man's body. And she was in one sense annoyed at whatever, Hare Krishna. So this is real. What Krishna book, it's just telling the truth, right? And it's a science and it's a philosophy, and if we understand it, then we can gain faith and progress further on the path of bhakti. The sage Narada therefore contemplated that the two demigods should remain for 100 years in the time of the demigods, not just 100 years. 100 years in the time of the demigods, that's a long time, in the form of trees. And after that, they would be fortunate enough to see the Supreme Personality of Godhead face to face. But then you can argue that 100 years in the time of the demigods compared to the amount of time that we've been here in the material world since time immemorial, that's nothing. You can always put that forward, that argument. If you're going to meet Krishna, that's nothing. After this, the great sage Narada returned to his abode, known as Narayana Ashram. Narayana Ashram. And the two demigods turned into trees, known as the twin Arjuna trees. The two demigods, favoured by the causeless mercy of Narada and given a chance to grow in Nanda's courtyard and see Lord Krishna face to face. Although the child Krishna was bound up to the wooden mortar, he began to proceed towards the twin trees in order to fulfill the prophecy of his great devotee Narada. Lord Krishna knew that Narada was his great devotee, and that the trees standing before him as the twin Arjuna trees were actually the sons of Kuvera. I must now fulfill the words of my great devotee Narada. There's another thing. If you're a great devotee, careful what you say. Because then Krishna has to fulfill it. If you're qualified Brahmin and you say something, Krishna has to fulfill it. I remember Jayapataka Maharaj, he was chastising some of his disciples because he was going to the airport, and one of his disciples was saying, oh, you're not going to make it, you're not going to make it. And he turned around to him and says, why are you cursing me not to make it? Why are you condemning me not to make it? Don't you realise you are a qualified Brahmin, and whatever you say has to come true? He chastised him. That's interesting, isn't it? And that's another thing that, and that's it's interesting in Krishna consciousness. There's no, in one sense, what the devotees say, there's no ambiguity, because Krishna consciousness lies in the positive, so we should always think positive. You know what I mean? And we try and avoid the negative, which is, you know what I mean? I mean, you can highlight the negative in preaching in one sense, you know, but you know, in our interactions, in our day-to-day life, we should always think positively. Like the ultimate, you know, the ultimate sense of that, or perspective of that is when Prabhupada said, always shoot for the rhino, you know, always think positive, always think big. I mean, so I must now fulfill the words of my great devotee Narada, he thought. Then he began to proceed through the passage between the two trees. And although he was able to pass through the passage, the large wooden mortar stuck horizontally between the trees. Taking advantage of this, Lord Krishna began to pull the rope which was tied to the mortar. As soon as he pulled with great strength, the two trees with more branches and limbs fell down immediately with a great sound. Out of the broken, fallen trees came two great personalities, shining like blazing fire. All sides became illuminated and beautiful by their presence. The two purified bodies immediately came before child Krishna and bowed down to offer their respects and prayers in the following words. Notice it says two purified bodies. That's why they were able to offer prayers and respect. Dear Lord Krishna, you are the original personality of Godhead, master of all mystic powers. Learned Brahmanas know very well that this cosmic manifestation is an expansion of your potencies, which are sometimes manifest and sometimes unmanifest. You are the original provider of the life, body and senses of all living entities. You are the eternal God, Lord Vishnu, who is all-pervading, the imperishable controller of everything. You are the original source of the cosmic manifestation, which is acting under the spell of the modes of material nature, goodness, passion and ignorance. You are living as a supersoul in all the multi-forms of living entities, and you know very well what is going on within the bodies and minds. So don't think we're alone. You should never get alone, because Krishna is always aware of what's going on in our bodies and minds. It's quite interesting. Therefore, you are the supreme director of all activities of all living entities. But although you are in the midst of everything which is under the spell of the material modes of nature, you are not affected by such contaminated qualities. No one under the jurisdiction of the material modes can understand your transcendental qualities. This is why we must try and rise above the modes, which existed before the creation. And therefore you are called the Supreme Brahman, who is always glorified by his personal internal potencies. In this material world you can be known only by your different incarnations. Although you assume different types of bodies, these bodies are not part of the material creation. They are always full of transcendental potencies of unlimited opulence, strength, beauty, fame, wisdom and renunciation. In the material existence, there is a difference between the body and the owner of the body. But because you appear in your original spiritual body, there is no such difference for you. When you appear, your uncommon activities indicate that you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Such uncommon activities are not possible for anyone in material existence. You are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, now appearing to cause the birth and death, as well as liberation of the living entities. And you are full with all your plenary power, expansions, who can bestow on everyone all kinds of benedictions. O Lord, O source of all good fortune and goodness, we offer our respectful obeisances unto you. You are the all-pervading Supreme Personality of Godhead, the source of peace and the Supreme Person in the dynasty of King Yadu. O Lord, our Father, known as Kabera, the demigod, is your servant, and similarly the great sage Narada is also your servitor, and only by their grace have we been able to see you personally. We therefore pray that we may always be engaged in your transcendental loving service by speaking only about your glories and hearing about your transcendental activities. No Prajalpa there then. Hare Krishna. And we're just going to finish that. May our hands and other limbs be engaged in your service, and our minds always be concentrated in your lotus feet, and our heads always be bowed down before the all-pervading universal form of your lordship. When the demigods Nalakabera and Manigriva finished their prayers, the child Lord Krishna, the master and proprietor of Gokul, bound to the wooden grinding mortar by the ropes of his shoulder, began to smile and said, "It was already known to me that my great devotee sage Narada had shown his causeless mercy by saving you from the abominable condition of pride due to possessing extraordinary beauty and opulence in the family of demigods. He saved you from gliding down to the lowest condition of hellish life. All these facts are already known to me. You are very fortunate because not only were you cursed by him, but you had the great opportunity to see him. If someone is able by chance to see face to face a great saintly person like Narada, who is always serene and merciful to everyone, then immediately that condition of soul becomes liberated." This is what we. This is interesting. I always remember Tamil Krishna Raj. I remember it's a quick. So I always tell this story because it's very unusual. There was a devotee who was really good at book distribution. He distributed 80 books on Oxford Street, big books on Oxford Street, because he wanted to be noticed by Tamil Krishna Raj. And I thought to myself, I was helping Kirtan and Latchry and things like this, and thinking, he's not going to notice me. I'm not very good at books. I mean, you know what? And then the next day, on the Sunday, they're reading out the bookstores, and the devotee's name was Dharma Seta, and Tamil Krishna Raj says, they read out the top score, and Tamil Krishna Raj said, "Who is Dharma Seta?" And he raised his hand, so he noticed him, right? And then later on in the afternoon, Tamil Krishna Raj was outside, and he was talking to some people in the crowd, and I was walking, he had his back to me, and he was engaged in talking to about 3 or 4 people. And then all of a sudden, he turned around and looked at me, and looked straight at me, and then turned around again and came into this conversation. I thought, what? Krishna. So it says here, it says if one's fortunate, if someone is able by chance to see face to face a great saintly person like Narada, who is always serene and merciful to everyone, then immediately that conditioned soul becomes liberated. Of course, the other consideration is we may not realise that we've seen a great saintly person. We may have done. We may not recognise, depending on our level of advancement in Krishna consciousness. Yeah. But I'm saying, so in each case, you're still fortunate. So I'm saying, this is exactly like being situated in the full light of the sun. There cannot be any visionary impediment. Therefore, O Nalakavera Manigriva, your lives have now become successful because you have developed ecstatic love for me. This is your last birth within material existence. Now you can go back to your father's residence in the heavenly planet. And by remaining in the attitude of devotional service, you will be liberated in this very life. And notice what he said, by remaining in the attitude of devotional service. So it's not about what you accomplish, it's about your attitude, it's about your service attitude. It's so important. Your service attitude is so important. What is the service attitude? What is the service attitude?
To always offer your service.
Yeah, but we're servant to the servant to
Oh.
the servant. Yeah, but we always officer. That's good. Always officer. But we're the servant of the servant of the servant. 100 times removed or 1,000 times removed. We're never the master. We're the servant. We've always, if somehow or other, is stamped on our heart to our devotion, all the way through our devotional lives, we'll be very fortunate and we won't deviate to thinking that we're the master. Because the moment for conditioned souls, the moment we gain some spiritual advancement or whatever, then we get puffed up. The moment, whatever. And then, like I said, in this case, Nani Kubera and Mani Group, they got puffed up with it, but they saw a great saint, and then they got the mercy. So this is, I'll just repeat that. Now you can go back to your Father's residence in the heavenly planet, and by remaining in the attitude of devotional service, you'll be liberated in this very life. After this, the demigods circumambulated the Lord many times and bowed down before him again and again, and thus they left. The Lord remained bound up with the ropes to the grinding water. Thus ends Bhaktivedanta purport of the 10th canto of Krishna deliverance of Nana Kabera Managuna. Okay. Krishna book key.
Yeah.
Radha Dhamma Gita key.
Yeah.
Krishna.
Right.